Hello and welcome to the Atlantis Football YouTube channel. This clip will be from my podcast, which you can listen to on Spotify and Google Podcasts. It will also be up on Apple Podcasts very soon. Also, after this video, check out some of my other videos, including my video looking at the most underrated striker in Europe and my analysis of how Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang would fit into the Manchester United system. You can find those videos and others linked in the description below. In this clip, I'm briefly talking about the impact of the coronavirus on the transfer market, and then I go into talking about whether Paul Pogba is a wasted talent. I'll leave time markers to when I start talking about Pogba, just in case some of you want to skip the impact of the coronavirus part and just want to go straight to that part. I'll put in a time marker on the screen now so you can go to that part if you want to. And also a major problem that's going to be occurring because of the coronavirus is the devaluing of players. So if you look at transfermarket.com, you can obviously see the different values of players, and they've reported a significant drop in the value of nearly every player. If you look on our website, I think nearly every player on the site has decreased to some extent. I think that it was any player born after 1998 had their market value devalued by up to 10%, and I think over the course of the whole market, there was 9.22 billion lost in value in total. So who's going to be hit hardest? So it's obviously going to be teams that have just recently signed players for big money. So if you look at Griezmann at Barcelona, they signed him for £110 million in the summer. There's no way they will be able to recoup that sort of fee for him. His market value has decreased significantly. I reckon now if they were looking to sell him, they'd probably only be able to get maximum 70 million, because you've got to factor in, firstly, he's 29 now. He's on massive wages. Who's going to look to sign him? So even if there wasn't this massive problem, Barcelona would be looking at a significant financial loss on Griezmann. Also, you've got players like Coutinho as well, who were signed for big money, and they haven't really... I think Coutinho's done a pretty decent job at Bayern Munich, but he hasn't torn up any trees, and he hasn't really cemented himself in that Bayern squad and making them really push the boat out to sign him. So he's in a bit of a predicament as well, because who's going to be paying more than 60 million for Coutinho in the summer, and especially with those massive wages as well? He may be looking at another loan. You've got James Rodriguez as well. He's only got 1 year left on his contract, but he's still on those massive wages, which is going to rule out teams like Napoli, Borussia Dortmund, unless Real Madrid subsidise some of them, which they will be able to do for a year. But after that year, James isn't going to be on those same wages. So is he going to be prepared to take that massive cut? That's the question. And it's going to be a massive issue for sides, particularly big sides, with those big players that they wanted to shift, but also players at clubs like Leeds. If you look at Calvin Phillips maybe, or any of the championship sides who have top players who the Premier League might be interested in, they probably would have been looking to sell them for maybe £30 million plus. They probably won't be able to do that. I've heard reports on the transfer window podcast with Duncan Castles. He's had a few people on, and from other areas as well, that potentially you'll see 25% of a player's value wiped off. So just say Calvin Phillips was going to be sold by Leeds for 35 million. He may only be worth about 25 million pounds now, which is obviously going to be a massive issue for those clubs. It may actually help out the market, because what was happening is that sides had too much control, if anything, over certain players. So a good example of this would be Harry Kane at Tottenham. So he's got a contract until 2024. I've already done a video about this, so if you want this in more detail, check out that video. But basically, because of the longevity of his contract, it means that Tottenham are in no position to sell him, and it's basically ruling him out of any move, because he's going to cost £120 million plus in the transfer window. And who's going to be prepared to pay that for a 27-year-old Harry Kane coming off the back of a few injuries? So it's really, the market was really sort of skewed towards the clubs, even though people are saying they have that player power is on the increase. Clubs had really skewed the market. If you look at players like Sigurdsson and Richarlison being signed for £50 million, there's no way they were ever worth £50 million. They're probably £30 million. £30 million players, but because of the financial wealth in the Premier League, Swansea and Watford were able to charge that fee, and Everton for some reason were prepared to pay it as well, which definitely skewed the market as well. So overall, one good thing that could come from this financial loss in the market is that maybe fees start to reduce a bit, because they were getting out of hand a bit. It seemed like they were having exponential growth, where you were having £100 million players nearly every summer. Maybe that gets reduced, so that might be a positive. But talking about a player who would probably be worth around £100 million is Paul Pogba. So as I said on my YouTube channel, I will be doing a Let's Argue series, and one of the points that someone made was, is Paul Pogba a wasted talent? So I'm just going to go into this, and I would say that Pogba, overall, you'd probably say he was at Manchester United, just because the last 2 seasons seem to have really been wasted. Mourinho really just took a lump out of Pogba's career. He's obviously suffered from injuries, but he's obviously not been playing in the type of side, the quality of side that you would expect someone of his level to be playing in. Let's say when he's 23 and he signs for Manchester United, he signs for Alex Ferguson's Manchester United in 2010 as a Paul Scholes replacement. He'd be challenging for the title. He'd be played in a much better system, a much better team with players like Van Persie and Wayne Rooney ahead of him. And I think you do see Pogba become one of the best midfielders in the world, maybe alongside Yaya Touré's progression. But because he's been at Manchester United, which has been an absolute debacle under Mourinho in his last year, even in Mourinho's second last year, 2017-2018, there was all the problems going on with Pogba. The system was quite defensive, couldn't get the best out of Pogba himself, and everyone was sort of waiting for that next manager to see Pogba explode. And he did explode for a bit under Solskjaer, playing ahead of a double pivot in a 4-2-3-1, but injuries, and I think he did realise in the summer that this Manchester United side was pretty poor. It was worse than the Moyes era side, and that has been a massive contributor to why he struggled. He doesn't have the creativity alongside him in the team to really get the best out of him. He thrived when playing that counter-attacking system because he didn't have to rely on players behind him like Fred and McTominay being able to open up defences. Simply being, all they had to do really was get the ball into him, let him dribble with the ball, and his pass through balls into the likes of Rashford and Martial would be the thing that created the chances. And this is where he played his best football for Manchester United, arguably. But if we look back at the early years at Manchester United, we can actually see that statistically he did perform very well, and I think he was being over-criticised, largely because of the price tag and because he played for Manchester United. And at the time, Manchester United were the club everyone loved to hate because Mourinho had just come in. It seemed like, particularly the Liverpool favoured pundits, if you look at Souness, Jamie Redknapp, a lot of the Liverpool favoured pundits were sort of picking out Pogba as the main problem, even though there was so much more wrong with the side than him. And if anything, he was a victim of the side's poor style of play under Mourinho, and that really cost him. But I'm just going to look back at some of his statistics. So if we look at his key passes, in the 2016-17 season, he was actually 4th for the most key passes created by any central midfielder. He created 2 per game, with only Kevin De Bruyne, Cesc Fabregas and David Silva completing more. The season after, the 2017-18 season, he was a bit lower for this metric, completing 1.6 key passes, which still was the 5th most of any central midfielder in the league, which does show that Pogba was actually creating chances in this very poor United side. Maybe not the 2017-18 United side, which finished 2nd, but certainly the first year when they had Ibrahimovic and they finished 6th. They were struggling to create chances. But Pogba was a main source of anything they did create, really. He was the hub of the side, and I don't think he got enough credit for that role that he played. It does look like he'll leave this summer, and I do think he'll look back at his Manchester United career and think what could have been. If he had joined maybe in 2010 when Sir Alex Ferguson was there replacing Scholes, it could be a different story. Maybe if he'd stayed at Juventus as well, you would have seen him potentially get that move to Real Madrid a year later, because that did seem like it was in the offing. It did seem like a move that Real were lining up, potentially as a Luka Modric replacement, which is what he'll probably be now if he makes that move to Real Madrid. But whether he'll actually make that move is obviously dependable on the market. I think another year at United will really kill his chances of going down as one of the all-time great central midfielders. I think he has to move this summer to Real Madrid or Barcelona. I don't even think Juventus is an option at the moment, just because first of all, I don't think they'd be able to afford it because of the financial implications of the coronavirus, their massive wage bill, etc. Also, I think Real Madrid would be the perfect club for him. He can come in, he doesn't have to be the main guy that's expected to score goals, create, defend, as he's expected to do at Manchester United. He'll have a specific role on the left of Zidane's midfield three, and that will really suit his play. So for Pogba's sake and for Pogba's career, he should be looking to get that move. Whether he will, I don't know whether he will be able to. I think if he stays at United another year, he will go down as a wasted talent. someone that could have been one of the best central midfielders in the world. He had all the attributes to follow a Yaya Toure or a Frank Lampard, that sort of dynamic box-to-box midfielder who scores goals, dribbles, creates. He could have been that, but sadly, like a lot of players, Manchester United have really halted his career and stagnated his career. If you look at players like Marcus Rashford and Martial, they are slightly younger, but even their careers have stagnated to a degree. Martial's career definitely stagnated under Mourinho, and that's a massive problem for players now moving to Manchester United. You look at Jadon Sancho as well. Will he want to potentially face the same consequences that Pogba and Martial have faced? I think that may get overlooked just because once the money's there, once the opportunity's there, players are obviously going to be optimistic. But it's certainly something to keep an eye out for, not to just expect that big move and then think, well, if it doesn't go well, I can move again in 2 years. Look at Neymar. He's stuck at PSG now, unable to get that move because he's essentially priced himself out of the market due to his wages, due to the transfer fee. So it's definitely something that players have to look into when they make these big moves.